Today in Los Angeles, jury selection will start for the first of what will be thousands of trials involving state and federal groups suing the big social media companies. The lawsuits allege these companies have designed their platforms to be addictive, and that in turn has adversely affected young people's mental health. My colleague Erin Wu wrote a deep dive around these trials in last night's briefing newsletter. I want to bring her on to talk all about it. Erin, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So, walk us through this. Who exactly is suing the social media companies right now?
Right. So there are thousands of cases going on right now against the social media companies. This first case centers on a 19-year-old girl known only by her initials KGM, who's in Chico, California. She is claiming that the her social media addiction caused her depression, suicidal thoughts. Right. Originally, she was suing all four of the social media companies: Meta, TikTok, Snap, and YouTube. As of this morning, actually, TikTok also settled. So both TikTok and Snap have settled this first case. But essentially, there's thousands of cases split up into state and federal cases. The state cases are all families, like KGM's cases. The federal cases are families, but also school districts, state attorneys general, and Native American tribes.
And so, what are all these groups asking for specifically?
So the state cases are personal injury cases. So essentially, the plaintiffs are asking for damages to compensate them for their own medical expenses, but also pain and suffering, and then punitive damages to encourage the platforms not to do this again. In the federal cases, they're also asking for court orders, essentially forcing the platforms to change their behavior. So that's in the school district cases and the state attorneys general cases.
So it's not just money. In other words, I mean they're actually asking for changes to the platforms.
Right. So what the plaintiffs are arguing is that certain platform features are defective and ad- are causing addiction and these harm to young people. So it's not actually about the content on the platforms. It's around like how the platforms themselves have designed it. And so they're calling out things like infinite scroll, autoplay, targeted notifications, features designed to keep people on the platform longer and keep them coming back and back. And so what a court could order is for the platforms to have to change some of these features.
Now, I'm just thinking about this case, and this, someone with no legal background whatsoever, so I really know nothing here. But I am sort of thinking about how it should be relatively easy to prove maybe that social media is addictive, but maybe the challenge here is really showing that specifically is tied to young people's mental health. What sort of evidence are the plaintiffs thinking about bringing forward here?
Yeah, so essentially the plaintiffs are going to have to prove two things. Like A, they're going to have to prove that the platforms are addictive, and B, they're going to have to prove that there's a causal link between that addiction and then the harm to the kid's mental health. So I was chatting with a psychologist yesterday. There is some scientific evidence to support the idea of social media addiction. There have been some studies that have broadly shown a correlative link between time spent on social media platforms and negative mental health outcomes. And so some of that research does exist. What the platforms are obviously going to be arguing is that, oh, there's a lot of factors going into this. Like these kids were bullied off of the platforms. And so they're going to be trying to muddy the waters as much as possible.
Okay, and basically, it's not a slam dunk. I mean, what seems obvious to us is not a legal slam dunk, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so I mean, lawyers that I talk to are saying that it's really hard to know how these cases are going to go. And one thing that's interesting there is that these are jury cases. So basically, this what starts today is jury selection in the case. And so these cases will be tried by people like you and I who have grown up maybe using social media or at the very least have been steeped in this world for the past decade plus. And so it's going to be a lot of people with thoughts on social media and kind of coming in with preconceived notions. So it's going to be really interesting to see how jury selection goes.
How much is at stake here, do you think, maybe even money wise, for the social media companies?
Right. So the first group of cases is about money. So the plaintiffs are seeking compensatory damages. The plaintiffs are seeking compensatory damages and they're seeking punitive damages. And so it's kind of hard to know how much money exactly is at stake at this point. So the big wild card is how much money the jury awards for pain and suffering, which is a more fuzzy amount than just simply like medical expenses. And what one of the plaintiff's lawyers was telling me was like, for example, in a case where a family's child died by suicide and they're blaming the platforms on it, you're essentially asking the jury to put like a number value on a life. And so it becomes like kind of hard to guess at the outset. So TikTok and Snap have both settled this first case for some amount. We don't know how much that is, but that likely sets the floor for them in terms of how much they would be able to settle the other cases for. Mark Lanier, the plaintiff's attorney, is likely to give a number that he's asking for in opening statements next week, which will also give us an example. But like the very largest global settlement, which is how these cases often resolve, the tobacco industry was $206 billion over 25 years. So I mean, like this can be a lot of money.
Hmm. I wonder what you think this tells us about lawsuits that may inevitably come up with the AI platforms
Yeah.
in the coming years. And some of them are here right now, of
Yeah.
course. I sort of think about social media being a way that we get information and a way that we consume content. And the AI platforms are certainly going to be, if not they already are, the new way of getting information. I mean, did your reporting around these trials, did it tell you anything about how you think that situation could unfold?
Yeah, so these lawsuits are going to be really important for how for how the generative AI lawsuits play out. Like some of those have already settled, Character AI and Google. There are other lawsuits about ChatGPT. So essentially, like what the plaintiffs in this case are trying to prove is a essentially novel legal theory that's treating these platforms as products, as products with in some cases, what they're arguing is defective product design, so product liability, essentially. And so, like, rather than go after them for the content on the platforms, which has generally been held to be protected by Section 230, they're going after the platform design itself. And so this is the same legal theory, and in some cases, the same plaintiffs prosecuting the cases against the generative AI chatbot companies. And so this is going to have huge impact into what could play out in those cases.
And then one more question before you go. With all these trials against big tech companies have the biggest wallets and they can probably afford the best lawyers. And
Yeah.
I mean, they could conceivably keep this thing going for as long as they needed to. Meanwhile, the plaintiffs are, I mean, you've got families, you've got governments, it's not people with as many resources. So, how does a group of plaintiffs like that compete with big tech companies
Yeah.
legally?
Right. So, like, theoretically, big tech companies could just keep trying these cases like one at a time, like essentially forever. There's nothing theoretically like stopping them from continuing to do that. And like you see with like the asbestos industry, like there's not been a global settlement. And so like in that case, that is sort of what's happening. Like these cases are still being tried. On the other hand, like there is like some element of like reputational harm, for example, to like having Mark Zuckerberg like constantly up on the stand, like trying to say like, no, like my products are not like killing children. So companies in that sense have like a real incentive to not want to keep doing this. Again, you've already seen Snap and TikTok settle. Like Evan Spiegel was expected to testify before Snap settled, and now Snap is out of this first case. So these cases often resolve via some kind of global settlement. So once the first handful of cases, known as bellwether cases, have wrapped up, there's kind of more of an idea of like, this is how much money it could cost. This is like the legal claims, like this is the merit of each side. And so it's easier at that point for the sides to come to an agreement just because there's more understanding of kind of like what the outcomes could be and what the ballpark numbers could be.
Great. Well, Aaron, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Aaron Wu, our reporter who covers all things Google, all things social media, all things everything really here at The Information.